This video is to offer support with the point slope form worksheet that you have for algebra homework tonight. So today in class we talked about point slope formula, and we said that that formula, you probably want to have it written down somewhere, is y equals y1 plus b times x minus x1. And we talked about how x1 and y1 are your point, or your point that you're given, and then b represents our slope. And we talked about how we would use point slope form if we were literally given a point and a slope. So you'll notice we don't have an intercept here, right? That's the other type of form we've talked about, is intercept form, right? That's y equals a plus bx. But again, you're going to notice here we haven't been given a y-intercept. We've only been given a slope and a point. So if I want to write point slope form, again, it's probably good practice just to practice writing that formula. So y equals y1 plus b times x minus x1. And you want to label the coordinates of your point. So here I have x1, y1 for my point 2, 3, and it has a slope of -1/2. So again, that means my b value is -1/2. So again, I'm going to write this out. Y equals 3 plus -1/2 times x minus 2 when I substitute everything in. It's also correct to say y equals 3 minus 1/2 times x minus 2. That would be correct too. You can just leave it in that format right there. That's considered point slope form. So then for number 2 here, again, I would practice writing out y equals y1 plus b times x minus x1. And then again, pull out your point, x1, y1. Look at your slope. So again, that's going to be my b value. So y equals 4 plus 4 times x minus -1. And usually, right, when I subtract -1, this is going to become x plus +1. All right, I would pause the video here, and then I'm going to add the other answers on. So if you haven't tried the other ones yet, take a moment and do that. For number 3, the answer should be y equals 2 minus 5/3 times x. For number 4, we have y equals -2. For 5, we have y equals 5 minus 1/2 times x plus 2. Or y equals 6 minus 1/2 times x plus 4. And for number 6, again, there's two options depending on which point you used. Y equals -7 plus 5 times x plus 1, or y equals 3 plus 5 times x plus 1. For these last two problems, make sure when you've been given the 2 points, you're going to use those 2 points to find the slope first, and then use one of those points to plug into point slope form. For the next series of questions, we're being asked to give the slope of each of the following lines and name a point. So again, you're going to notice that these equations are in point slope form, just about. Some of them need to be adjusted just a little bit. So again, point slope form is y equals y1 plus b times x minus x1. So when we look at each formula, we want to make sure that it's in that form. So for example, on number 7, I can see here that it's not y equals, it's y plus 2 equals. So I actually need to move that 2. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides so that I now will have this in y-intercept form. Or I'm sorry, point-intercept form. So y equals -2 plus 2/3 times x minus 4. So again, you'll just notice I moved that -2 up to the front because I know that's going to be my y1 value. So now when I look at this, again, I'm going to compare it to my formula here at the bottom. I can see my x1, I'm looking for my point here, for example, and since it's minus x1, I can see that my x value is going to be 4. My y value right here, my y1, it's right here, is going to be -2, so that's my point. And then pulling out the slope, I'm going to pull out 2/3 as the slope. So then I'm going to do the same thing on the other ones here. Again, I might need to rewrite the equation first. Just like you see over here, I have y minus 3 equals. I need to make it into y equals So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I then get y equals, I'm going to write the 3 first actually, 3 plus 1/2 times x minus 3. And now, like before, I'm going to pull out my point. So it's x minus x1. So my x value is 3. And then at the front, I have y1. So my y value is also 3. And my slope right here, right, is 1/2. So again, it's just a matter of pulling everything out of the formula once you've written it. Again, remember on your quiz tomorrow, you can use your notes, right? You can use your resources. So don't think that you have to memorize this quite yet. All right, so we're going to move next to number 9. We'll do one more together, and then I'll just put in the rest of the answers so you can look over them yourself. So again, I'm going to subtract 5 from each side. I now have y equals, again, I'm going to put the negative 5 actually at the front, plus 1/4 times x plus 2. And now I can pull out the coordinates of my point. So I'm going to be careful here because it's x minus x1. So if this became a plus 2, that means my x coordinate is actually negative 2. My y coordinate is negative 5. So there's my point. And my slope here is going to be 1/4. All right, if you haven't tried the other ones yet, I would give them a shot and then check your answers here in just a moment. So you can feel free to pause the video. For number 10, my slope value, b, should be 2, and my point is negative 3, 0. For number 11, my slope value should be negative 3, and my point should be negative 1, 8. For 12, my slope should be negative 1/5, and my point should be 0, negative 3. For the next few problems, we're going to actually be graphing. We're also going to find the slope and the point, or a point, from the equation. And so again, you're going to notice that some of these are not set up in point slope form yet. So you're actually going to have to, for this one, move the plus 2 by subtracting 2 from each side. So I'm going to get y equals negative 2 plus 1/3 times x plus 1. And again, that will help me compare this to point slope form. Right, so again, y equals y1 plus b times x minus x1. And so that helps me think about my point, right? So again, my x1 and my y1, I'm going to pull those out here. So in this case, my point, it becomes plus 1, but since it was minus x1, my x value is going to be negative 1, and my y1 here is going to be negative 2. And my slope, my b value here, is going to be 1/3. And so now I'm going to go ahead and make a graph of that. So you might choose to kind of set up your axes on the graph. And in this case, I'm going to graph my point for negative 1, negative 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and plot the slope. So up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. And I know I don't have a straight edge here, so my line might be a little bit crooked, but that's approximately where your line should be. Looking at another one here, number 14. Again, I need to rewrite my equation, so I need to move this plus 1 by subtracting 1 from each side. So my new equation is y equals negative 1 minus 1/2 times x minus 3. Now I can pull out my coordinates. So again, I have minus x1, so my x value is going to be 3. And up here I've got my y1, so that's negative 1. And then my slope, I'm going to pull out right here, is going to be negative 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my graph again, set up my x-axis and my y-axis. And here I've got my point at 3, negative 1, so over 3, down 1. And my slope is negative 1/2, so down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. And again, I'm going to kind of collect that roughly. So your graph should look something like that. You have a number of other graphs to look at here. So again, if you haven't tried them yet, I would give them a shot and then go on to the next answers. And then I'll have the answers for you in just a minute. For number 15, I need to rewrite my equation as y equals 3 minus 2 times x minus 4. And the point that I'm going to pull out is 4, 3. And my slope is going to be negative 2. So again, looking at my graph here, I have a point at 4, 3, so over 4, up 3. My slope is -2, so down 2, over 1, down 2, over 1. And I'm going to connect those together. And then over here, the next one I have y equals 3x. I need to move that -5, so +5. Again, usually I like to write it this way instead, so y equals 5 plus 3x, because that helps me to see that y1 value. And I know you might be looking at this and thinking about how is there a point, right? But again, I'm hoping you're remembering that this is 5 plus 3 times x plus 0. And so, right, this is where that coordinate point comes in, right? Really, my point is 0, 5, which is also my y-intercept, which is nice. And my slope here is 3. So I'm going to graph this guy here. So my point is at 0, 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My slope is 3, so up 3 over 1. So my graph looks approximately like this. And moving on to the last two. So on number 17, again, I need to rewrite my equation. So I've got y equals -3 plus 0 times x minus 3. And in this case, I can pull out my point. So my point I see here, again, since it's x minus x1, my x value is actually going to be a +3, and my y value is -3. And then my slope here is actually 0. So as I graph this, I'm going to have a point here at 3, -3, so over 3, down 3. And then the slope is 0, so this is going to be a horizontal line. For number 18, I need to rewrite this again, so y equals 1, I'm going to say minus 5/2 times x plus 2. So again, pulling out my point, this becomes +2. I know that that x value is actually a -2. My y value is a 1. My slope is -5/2. So graphing this here, I have a point at -2, 1, so back 2, up 1. And then my slope is -5/2, so down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over 2, down 5, over 2, right, and then connecting those guys together. And that's it. So those are some of the skills that you're going to need to be able to think about for your quiz tomorrow with point-slope form. You also want to think about slope-intercept form, right, which is y equals a plus bx. So just be kind of thinking about the different forms that you know, and depending on what kind of information you're given, if you're given the slope or the y-intercept or a point, or maybe 2 points to find the slope, you should be able to kind of manipulate those different pieces. See you tomorrow.